to help her win. Because we know that Donald Trump would sell this country for $1 if it meant lining his own pockets and greasing the palms of his Wall Street friends. And I, for one, am tired of hearing about how a two-bit union buster thinks of himself as more of a patriot than the woman who fights every single day to lift working people out from under the boots that breathe, trampling on our way of life.
Stand up.
Yeah, we are off. And they were standing up in Chicago last night at the United Center. That was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez firing up the crowd at day one of the Democratic National Convention. And from the DNC in Chicago, on today's show, I've got Nayyera, who you know and love of MSNBC, CNN, SiriusXM, and a former State Department at the Obama administration. We love Nayyera. I had a great conversation with her. And our own Abigail Hummel joins us. I say our own because, of course, she's a longtime listener, supporter, subscriber. She and her dad, Dr. Barry Hummel, are family here in the stand-up community, and they co-host Pops on Hops. Well, guess what? Abigail is at the DNC as well, and I caught up with both Nayyera and Abigail. I think you'll love both of those conversations. They were really inspiring and detailed, and I'm really happy that both of them were able to join me today, and they might be joining me all week. I'll check in with both of them and many more people who are there, including tomorrow, Joanne Carducci, a.k.a. JoJo from Jers. I'm supposed to talk with her tomorrow. But if you want to jump to my conversations with Nayyera and Abigail, Nayyera starts at 24 minutes in, and then Abigail begins at 39 minutes in. But I've got your news headlines and clips from the DNC, a whole bunch of them for you coming up right now. So let's get to it. No, I can't do any of it without you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Sign up and subscribe now. All right, most of the news, of course, is about the DNC in Chicago, but I've got a whole bunch of other headlines for you as well. Let's just get to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is in Israel for his 9th trip, and he said that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had accepted a, quote, bridging proposal put forward by mediators trying to broker a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Spokesman for Netanyahu confirmed that Israel had agreed to the proposal. Hamas officials did not immediately comment, but they have called the mediators' proposal fundamentally slanted toward Israel. And, of course, in a related story in Tel Aviv, the Israeli police said that a powerful explosive had detonated on a road in the south of the city, injuring one passerby. Hamas's military wing and Islamic Jihad took responsibility for what they said was a suicide bombing, and they threatened further attacks. Now, let's go to the other war in Ukraine, where they aim to entrap Russian troops in the Kursk region near the border with Ukraine, and Russian troops are at risk of being encircled. Military analysts apparently telling number of media outlets the assessment came after Ukraine's bombing over the weekend of bridges that are only routes for resupply or retreat. The potential entrapment of Russian forces in the area adds another challenge for Russia after it was caught off guard by Ukraine's startling incursion earlier this month. The operation has injected a new sense of optimism to Ukrainian forces that had been backpedaling for months elsewhere along the front lines. All right, let's come back here to home for the disgraced former Republican Congressman George Santos. Guess what? He pled guilty yesterday to wire fraud and aggravated identity theft in federal court. And the plea allows Santos to avoid a trial and nearly 24 charges for which he was facing as many as 22 years in prison. He agreed to pay nearly $375,000 in restitution, and he will almost certainly face prison time, maybe 6 to 8 years, which is crazy. And also, well, justice. Now let's look at some other stories. Americans are increasingly worried about losing their jobs, apparently. The New York Fed found as officials weigh potential interest rate cuts. Congress, the House Republicans, made a formal impeachment case against President Biden without any proof of any crimes. Business headline I saw was interesting that companies are stockpiling components and delaying expansions to prepare for tariff hikes that Trump said he would implement if elected. And the blue supermoon, probably the decade's last, will be visible through Wednesday. Now let's get to the DNC. There's 77 days until Election Day, and the Democratic National Convention opened last night in Chicago with a burst of energy and optimism fueled by the replacement of President Biden at the top of the ticket with his Vice President Kamala Harris. It's being called the switch now. I've heard people referring to it as the switch. Protesters said they'll gather by the thousands outside the convention. Chicago officials are confident they'll avoid a repeat of the chaos that unfolded in 1968. President Joe Biden last night was greeted with a lengthy standing ovation and greetings of "Thank you, Joe," when he took to the stage at the DNC. He made the case for the party's historic presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, who then appeared earlier that night to thank President Biden for his historic leadership. Also heard from Hillary Clinton, who received one of the loudest receptions on day one of the convention as she slammed Donald Trump while saying Kamala Harris would advocate for all Americans. We heard from UAW union leader Sean Fain, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Mallory McMorrow, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Lauryn Hill, and Maxine Waters, and several more people that I'm not including that spoke last night. I can't name all of them, but it was an exciting night with the focus on Operation Project 2025 and women's reproductive rights, which are both two issues that are going to be front and center throughout this week at the DNC. Let's see. We also heard from the First Lady, Jill Biden. Kamala Harris seated most of the night in a VIP suite alongside her running mate, Tim Walz, and their spouses. And now let's get to some of the clips that I've brought for you, including starting with Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, who centered his speech on reproductive rights.
J.D. Vance says women should stay in violent marriages and that pregnancies resulting from rape are simply inconvenient. Their policies give rapists more rights than their victims. That's not inconvenient. It's just plain wrong. And a woman grieving a non-viable pregnancy shouldn't be required to carry it to term just to listen to her child die or to hear no sound at all. All women should have the freedom to make their own decisions. Freedom over their own bodies. Freedom about whether to pursue IVF. Freedom about whether to have children at all. How we treat people transcends party lines. It goes right to the heart of who we are. My faith teaches me the golden rule that I am to love my neighbor as myself. And the parable of the Good Samaritan says we are all each other's neighbors. So I want anyone watching tonight, Republican, Independent, Democrat, to know that you are welcome here. We believe in an America where we live out our values, end anger politics once and for all, and move beyond this us versus them by remembering we are all Americans. That's how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris lead.
All right, that is Andy Beshear, the Kentucky governor last night at the DNC. Now, one of the biggest and most anticipated appearances was from Hillary Clinton, and this is a little bit of what she had to say last night.
I see the freedom to look our children in the eye and say, in America, you can go as far as your hard work and talent will take you, and mean it. And you know what? On the other side of that glass ceiling is Kamala Harris raising her hand and taking the oath of office as our 47th President of the United States. Because, my friends, when a barrier falls for one of us, it falls. It falls and clears the way for all of us. So for the next 78 days, we need to work harder than we ever have. We need to beat back the dangers that Trump and his allies pose to the rule of law and our way of life. Don't get distracted or complacent. Talk to your friends and neighbors. Volunteer. be proud champions for the truth and for the country that we all love. I want my grandchildren and their grandchildren to know I was here at this moment, that we were here, and that we were with Kamala Harris every step of the way. This is our time, America. This is when we stand up. This is when we break through. The future is here. It's in our grasp. Let's go win it.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton last night. Oh, sorry. She wasn't done. There's still music. All right. And frequent guest here on the show. Well, she's been on a couple times. State Senator Mallory McMorrow put the focus on Project 2025 when she held up a giant book, which she said was
over the next 4 nights, you are going to hear a lot about what is in this 900-page document. Why? Because this is the Republican blueprint for a second Trump term. That's right. They went ahead and wrote down all the extreme things that Donald Trump wants to do in the next 4 years. And then they just tweeted it out, putting it out on the internet for everybody to read. So, we read it. And whatever you think it might be, it is so much worse. Tonight, I want to tell you about just one aspect of Project 2025. It's planned to turn Donald Trump into a dictator.
All right, State Senator Mallory McMorrow of Michigan. I should get her back on the show maybe this week. Now let's go to Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who has also been on the show. Look at this show. I've had a lot of these folks on, huh? How about it? Thank you very much for your support. I couldn't do it without you, but we love Jasmine Crockett, and her whole speech is worth watching, as were all of these in their entirety. But I'm just giving you some samples from last night to make you feel like you were there and just give you something of what you might have missed.
And leader of the free world. So let's compare their resumes, shall we? One candidate worked at McDonald's while she was in college at an HBCU. HU. The other was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and helped his daddy in the family business. Housing discrimination, that is. She became a career prosecutor while he became a career criminal. With 34 felonies, 2 impeachments, and 1 porn star to prove it.
Yeah, I sure am glad that Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett is on our side, and I'm glad that Congressman Jamie Raskin is on our side, too. He was there last night, and this is a little bit of his speech.
Kangaroo Court Supreme Court justices cannot even try to steal it. Let's make every vote count. Let's make sure every vote is counted. Let's let freedom ring, and let's let democracy work in America.
Yeah. Awesome. Now I want to play you. This is almost 3 minutes of Aunt Maxine, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, telling a pretty great story from Fannie Lou Hamer to Kamala Harris.
I was just 22 years old when Fannie Lou Hamer made her presence known at another Democratic convention. It was in 1964 in Atlantic City, and she arrived with a group of black delegates from Mississippi. And she simply asked that her delegates be seated in place of the state's all-white delegation. She told the people in the room about the violence she suffered at the hands of white police because she a black woman, had demanded her right to vote. When she finished, she asked the country a simple but profound question. Is this America? She didn't get the outcome she was hoping for in Atlantic City. But you can bet that when the official Mississippi delegation was seated at the convention 4 years later, Fannie Lou Hamer was sitting there with them. Now here we are, 60 years later at another Democratic convention with Kamala Harris as our party's nominee. Oh, so I know there is no better leader to marshal us into the future. Kamala has been a courtroom prosecutor, a district attorney, an attorney general, a United States senator, vice president of the United States. And when the dust settles in November and Americans of all stripes have elected her, their president, I know she'll be thinking about Fannie Lou, who I happen to know is one of Kamala's heroes. In that moment, all of us, from New York to Pennsylvania to Arizona to California, we can ask ourselves, is this America? And we will be able to say loudly and proudly, you're damn right it is.
Yeah, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, the legend, on stage last night at the DNC. And now let's head over to one of the most powerful labor leaders in the country. He has endorsed Kamala Harris. It's Shawn Fain of the UAW.
For the UAW and for working class people everywhere, this election comes down to one question. Which side are you on? On one side, we have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who have stood shoulder to shoulder with the working class. On the other side, we have Trump and Vance, two lapdogs for the billionaire class who only serve themselves. So for us in the labor movement, it's real simple. Kamala Harris is one of us. She's a fighter for the working class. And Donald Trump is a scam.
The crowd then broke out into chants, Trump's a scab. I guess it's better than lock him up. All right, well, here is the President of the United States. This is President Joe Biden last night talking about how much of an honor it has been to serve as our president.
Folks, I've got 5 months left in my presidency. I've got a lot to do. I intend to get it done. It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more. I love my country more. And all this talk about how I'm angry at all those people who said I should step down, that's not true. I love my country more, and we need to preserve our democracy. In 2024, we need you to vote. We need you to keep the Senate. We need you to win back the House of Representatives. And above all, we need you to beat Donald Trump. And elect Kamala and Tim President and Vice President of the United States of America.
There you go. A little bit of President Biden's speech last night. And before he spoke, actually, I got a little out of order. We did hear briefly from Kamala Harris, and I want to bring you, I think this is most of that from last night's night one of the DNC in Chicago.
To be with everyone this evening in this hall and everyone at home. This is going to be a great week. And I want to kick us off by celebrating our incredible President Joe Biden, who will be speaking later tonight. Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation, and for all you will continue to do. We are forever grateful to you. Thank you, Joe. And looking out at everyone tonight, I see the beauty of our great nation. People from every corner of our country and every walk of life are here, united by our shared vision for the future of our country. And this November, we will come together and declare with one voice, as one people, we are moving forward. With optimism, hope, and faith, so guided by our love of country, knowing we all have so much more in common than what separates us. Let us fight for the ideals we hold dear, and let us always remember, when we fight, we win. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Good night, everyone.
Yeah, Kamala Harris with a brief appearance at the first night of the DNC last night. And I got to say, I think that when we fight, we win mantra is great messaging. It's perfect rallying cry because at minimum it means when we vote, we win. And most of us are voting for her. So I thought that was great. And that is what I have for you on today's headlines and clips from the first night of the DNC. Man, that was a lot. It's a lot, this whole show, I should say, because I've got two guests and all of the clips and everything. So thank you very much for your support, for listening, and for your feedback on how to make it all better, as always. All right, well, let's get to my guests, shall we? Both of them were at the DNC yesterday. I've known my first guest here since I met her on the panel when we were both guests on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher back in, I think, March of 2018. We remain friends. She is a host at Sirius XM. She has anchored a nightly newscast and was a foreign affairs correspondent for the Black News Channel. She previously served as a senior director in the White House and senior advisor at the State Department when President Obama was in office, advising the nation's top leaders on issues of international security and diplomacy. And that is where I start my conversation with her. Nayyera Haq, everybody. Follow her on Threads, on Twitter, and she hopefully will be here a lot more this week and after. Let's do it right now from the DNC in her suite. She was sitting right in the arena when we talked. It's Nayyera Haq. The one uncertain thing about this convention is how the pro-Palestinian protests are going to be. How big are they going to be? What difference are they going to make? How close are they going to be? Is there going to be violence? People talk about 1968. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And what are you anticipating? It seems like that's the one thing that we're not certain about.
So security is definitely tight. I mean, this is the night that the sitting president is coming. So tonight's going to be, extra level and layers of security. So you are like 1,000 feet out and you experience your first going through a magnetometer before you even, you can barely see the convention center and you're already going through security protocols, right? And, cars can't come that close. All of that feels relatively normal for a convention. And there's always protest areas, but you're right. Chicago, 1968, Chicago police beating up student protesters because of a war. The idea of a convention that was not typical even inside the room. All of that makes sense why these images and ideas are coming forward. But I think, and again, maybe this is the optimism really feeding in, but I don't think the violence and stress is going to be there in the same way, because what's happening inside the convention hall is actually a celebration of unity. We've got the first Palestinian activists and human rights official meeting and discussion as part of the convention calendar. So there is a place for people to go today where they can talk and organize. The Uncommitted movement is holding that. They're still strong. Their folks are engaged in the process. I think there's a lot of disappointment in the DNC platform itself, not talking about divestment or arms embargo to Israel, but there's a recognition of two-state solution. That's on some of the politics of it. But the energy and the tone of the country is also different at this moment. So I'm hoping that Chicago police are smart enough not to instigate and attack people who are protesting. That's a police issue, but it's certainly the protesters. They have a grievance. They have a sincere policy desire, and they absolutely should press in that. And this is the place to influence from within the party to have those conversations.
What is Kamala Harris? How does she represent the future administration, hopefully, different than the current administration? Do you think the pro-Palestinian protesters, you and I care deeply about this issue, obviously, as well, but do you think it's a change? Do they see a change, or unless you see a change in policy vis-a-vis Israel's invasion, nothing changes?
Yeah, I'm hearing two things that are connected. The first is, wow, her first outing on national security was standing next to Benjamin Netanyahu and telling him to his face at a press conference that he needed to work on a two-state solution and that Palestinian suffering mattered for American foreign policy and mattered to her. It took 4 months for Joe Biden to say the word Palestinian and recognize Palestinian suffering, right? So there's already a distinction there. Now, granted, that is a pretty low bar we're talking about, but that is where we're at in America right now. So I think that is giving people hope. I think one of the challenges, though, is just 2 weeks ago, there was another arms sale to Israel. So people are reacting to that. The real-time policy is not changing. And the voters who care about these issues want to know that there is something that they can hang their hat on, because so many of it's an older generation of organizers felt like they really stuck their necks out for a Biden administration against Trump, and they didn't get the recognition and acknowledgement that they deserved. And so they're hoping that, this team does a little bit better on that and can give them something. They said, just give us something that we can hang our hat on so we can bring our uncommitted friends to this. But a lot of concern that folks who are disappointed in Biden administration policy may drift third party. And as we know, in some districts, every vote is going to count. And so that third party, when you're effectively in a binary system, that's some of the education and discussion that's also happening in here, is how to make sure those people who would have been voting Democrat don't make the mistake, as far as they're concerned, of trying to, quote unquote, waste their vote on a third party.
Yeah. I'm surprised to see you wearing a RFK Jr. t-shirt.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of denying science, even though that's what resulted in my children and it's my husband's livelihood and my entire family. I'm like, let's just go against every fiber of my being and not take vaccines.
Oh, did your kids, were you IVF? Did I know that?
Both of them. I don't know if he did. I'm pretty comfortable talking about it, but both of them were IVF.
Damn. How do you, now that you brought it up, just how does that issue animate people who aren't political but are using IVF? Let's say you're a Christian conservative and it's the only way you can. And that's I'm sure a lot. I'm sure a lot of folks like that.
It is like I'm almost losing my words because of how insane it is driving women and men of this generation of childbearing years, that we have this wonderful, amazing tool that is about starting families. It is as pro-family as you can get to use science to help you have a, biological family. And that some of these yahoos sitting in Congress and sitting in state electorates are like, what? And it was very predictable. Like the line is very clear. They go from an embryo, not even a fetus, an embryo is human life. Therefore, you should not be able to do IVF because you might risk those embryos, right? Like that's what they have done. They've taken a seed and said you have to protect it like you would an oak tree. And it's barely even the seed yet. It's like the seed hasn't even been germinated yet. I'm trying to make parallels here to show how insane this sounds, but it all is part of that bullshit that has been the anti-choice campaign. And this is the natural conclusion of it. So I think that awareness of how deep that's gone and how far it's gone is really animating the 60% of voters who are not affiliated as Republicans or Democrats, because this is something that hits us in the most personal ways possible.
At the RNC, the word abortion did not come up. They didn't talk about it. I'm guessing at the DNC, we're going to hear probably more about, in terms of issues, women's reproductive rights, including abortion and IVF, than anything else. Would that be a fair assumption?
Oh, absolutely. I forget how many times it's already mentioned in the platform and mentioned also in the context of Trump and Republican rollbacks on federally protected rights. So it's part of a series of federally protective rights that the GOP has worked actively against, voting rights being another one, right? So it's reminding us in this historic city at this historic moment of what was at threat in 1968 for civil rights. That's at threat again now. And I think that parallel is going to come out very strongly. And the vice president already came out with an economic policy platform in which he's talking about a opportunity economy. A big focus of that was being able to buy a home, being able to afford to start a family and take off from work. Those are family-centric policies that J.D. Vance and Trump aren't talking about when they're talking about cat ladies and, what you should do with your couch.
You did it. What do you say to those who are criticizing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the campaign, for not giving interviews or press avails?
I think it is a very smart strategic choice on their part to use the room of a rally and how many people you can reach in a short amount of time, giving a scripted, really strong set of remarks. They are introducing themselves to the American public in a new way. That is a great way to do it. I think a lot of the people who complain about, they're not giving media interviews, want to find either something that they can clip and put out of context and use socially or for their own websites or for their own media channel. I'm a big fan of people in power giving interviews to the press, but I also deeply, deeply understand why at this moment, so quickly after having been, she's technically not even the nominee, technically yet, until this convention is done, why they would do a rollout that is not about giving any space or any wiggle room for there to be a new soundbite or new snapshot.
Right.
Also, because every time Trump talks or does an interview, he has something and like 20 bonkers things that are more than enough to take over people's time. And let's focus on the actual crazy on the other side of the ticket.
One of the craziest things he said maybe ever is his prediction that Joe Biden would return this week in Chicago and take back the nomination. Do you think that will happen?
No.
You don't?
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Donald. It's Donald, America has moved on. And now you're the old guy everyone's making fun of. It's you, Donald. That's the problem. Sorry.
I wanted to be there. I almost still want to get on a plane and come there. But the question is, do conventions matter? What is this week going to do to the conversation, to the campaign, with just over 70 days remaining?
Oh, there'll be some great clips going on around. We'll have probably, some surprise celebrity artists. And Democrats are usually pretty good about bringing some interesting people together on that front. It's not some old director sitting there talking across from a stool, which I still remember from Clint Eastwood doing one Republican convention. So, there's some really fun artists and things that connect this to pop culture, online influencers who are going to be there on stage as part of this commitment to bringing in a new generation. They'll be talking every day, at the podium. And it's about the enthusiasm and energizing of the people who are definitely party stalwarts or have been come up in the party, organizing them to give them a path forward, because early voting is starting. September 16th, I think it is, in Pennsylvania, early vote. So it's a very short time away. This was the concern. People are like, unconstitutional, how Biden, blah, 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 the Trumpian right-wing rhetoric. This is how it's done. You don't go into a convention and have a big fight because you only have such a short period of time to actually turn out the vote for Election Day.
So you mentioned celebrities, you mentioned online influencers. So much has changed since the last convention because of COVID and the convention before that, just in terms of social media and technology. What else do you think we're going to see in terms of the DNC that's going to be different?
I'm really interested to see how the main headliners each night, how they talk about the mission. And here's what I mean. My last convention, I remember Michelle Obama, and she's such a phenomenal speaker. And I remember sitting there listening to her say, when they go low, we go high. And now the steps say things like, we're ready to fight. And that's a tonal difference that I think I and many other people are welcoming right now. And I think we want to know, what does it look like for Democrats to fight? What does it look like for Tim Walz and Kamala Harris to really talk the talk and walk the walk? So I'm curious what comes out as that. Here's how we approach things, mission statement coming out of this.
I can't imagine that it won't be that this week. It's hard to predict what's going to happen other than, I would imagine, a lot of good press, good media, et cetera, coming out of this week. And so I hope that we can talk more this week. I know that you're going to be super busy there. Who else have you seen? Who are you seeing walking around, Nayyera? Anybody? Any exciting?
Okay, I've seen all of the TV anchors that we know from cable news, and everyone's getting set for their shots. It's kind of funny. Everyone is shorter in real life. I mean, politicians, everybody is shorter in real life than you expect. I am short, folks, so don't ever anticipate me to be tall. I'm 5'3", but it's still early where I am. As you can see, the seats haven't filled up yet because it's not prime time. So I've got my spot staked out here, and hopefully by the time I talk to you next, I'll have some more random backdoor political nerd insights to give you.
Are there going to be a lot of right-wing conservative types there as well covering, I'm sure, right?
There's if you can't see it quite here, there's a Fox News booth right there. They will also have, floor access. I don't know if in Radio Row, what the right-wing hosts are. So I'll dig in and find out for you. Maybe I'll snap some photos as well as, podcasting, what that looks like. But it's a media access facility at the end of the day, and that's not going to be an issue at the DNC of having media access, even if it's not Kamala Harris doing interviews. Plenty of people looking to talk about what's happening here and give access to more. And there's a massive foreign press contingent, which is a lot of the folks that I'm talking to. And they're very, some of the questions that I've gotten from British television, Australian, and even Iranian activism television is like, well, is this what's going to happen, and is this actually possible, and why is there so much energy and enthusiasm? And I welcome those questions. I think it's really exciting that people are thinking that something might change.
Well, I look forward to talking to you more, and whenever you can this week, checking in, sending pictures, anything we can use. You're such a great resource and a great friend. I was supposed to be on CNN on Friday night, and then they're like, oh, we don't need you anymore. And so I was like, whenever that happens, when I get bumped, I go to see who they have on, and I turn on the panel, and there you are. And I go, you know what? better that they had Nayyera than me for sure. But
no, I think you would have lost. I mean, I lost a couple of brain cells from some of the things that I had to counter. I think you would have lost.
No, you were. I watched it, and I would have been very rude where you weren't. And also, but I just got excited that I would have been sitting next to you because it's been such a long time since we've seen each other.
Then I think we need to do that. We need to figure out how you and I can get back up.
Yeah. Well, let's keep talking this week. Thank you so much for all this time, and I'm looking forward to checking in with you. You're one of the smartest people I know, as you know, and I'm so glad to touch base and connect with you. Good luck. Right. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon, folks.
All right, Nayyera Haq, thank you very much. That was so great, and I look forward to talking to her more this week. And now I'm very excited to bring the first dispatch from stand-up senior DNC correspondent. We'll call her Abigail Hummel. Abigail is one of our youngest listener and subscribers, supporters. She's often been at the Hangouts, and of course her dad is a legend in stand-up community, Dr. Barry Hummel. They're down in Florida, and Barry was supposed to go, but he couldn't make it. Abigail explains all of it here at the top. Currently, she's an administrative specialist for the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at her alma mater, the University of Florida. But her day job is the least interesting thing about Abigail. She co-hosts the Pops on Hops podcast with her dad, Barry, and they discuss beer, music, and family. She's been an avid performer since childhood. You may have seen her in a 2001 Super Bowl commercial or per episode of Malcolm in the Middle. That's right. She is a natural performer who's competed in performance and playwriting in high school. She's passionate about government. As you can see, she worked for the U.S. Census in 2020. She served as an election worker several times. And nowadays, when she's not working or prepping an album, she's reading for her 2 book clubs, doing Sudoku or listening to podcasts, and being our senior DNC correspondent. Ladies and gentlemen, Abigail Hummel at the DNC in Chicago all week. All right, there she is now, Abigail Hummel in Chicago at the DNC. First of all, have you been to Chicago before? Have you spent time there?
I've not spent a lot of time. I've been here a couple times just for an afternoon, and both in November. So this is completely different.
Any culture shock at all, whether it be the weather, the people, the elevated train system?
I've actually gotten really good at the elevated train system already. So no culture shock there. And it's slightly cooler and breezier than Florida. So honestly, I'm having a great time.
Did you have any struggle getting through the turnstile? And when I go to a new city, I sometimes am that person, and it can be quite embarrassing because you never want to look like that, like you're not from that town while using public transportation. Did you struggle at all? You're smart. You're a very smart person.
No, I took the train from Midway, so I had all my luggage with me. So yeah, I struggled. I actually had a worker try to help me because I was struggling so much. But
that's hilarious. If there's any video of that, we'd love to make fun of you. Now, I'm so happy that you're there and doing this with us all week. But having talked to you just now before I hit record, it seems like you're really happy that you're doing it. Even on day one, you've already seen a lot. We're going to just go through a little bit of it, and we're getting all kinds of great names and references and workshops. But first of all, who are you and why are you in Chicago at the DNC, Abigail?
I'm a private citizen, and I'm here basically as a Nepo baby. My dad donated quite a significant sum to the DNC, and I think he was hoping to come, but he couldn't make the dates work. So he called me and said, "You have to decide in the next hour, but would you like to go to the DNC?" And if someone asks you that, you don't think, you just say yes, and then you figure out the details later. So that's what I did. And I'm here and I'm having a great time, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to my parents, and my next several birthdays and Christmases are this. But
why are you so why do you that's so great, but why do you feel so good about it? Why are you so grateful to be there? I know that you care about a lot of different issues quite a bit, but what is so special? Why are you so grateful?
This election in particular, and in particular since Biden handed the reins to Kamala, that act in itself and the energy and the joy and the positivity that has come out of that completely turned around my mental health in a really hard time for me. Things in life were difficult, and then the political situation just overlaid on top of that was incredibly sad. And I just feel so fired up right now. And I know that other people my age are equally as fired up, and other people younger than me are fired up as well. And I think that's what makes me so excited and so grateful to be here, because I am seeing a lot of young faces, and a lot of young faces with delegate credentials on. And that's really cool to see. So yeah, I'm just thrilled.
That's great. And I'm sorry to hear that you've been struggling, but so many of us have been or were for any number of personal reasons in our own journey, in our own lives. And then it seemed like a lot of it had to do with the future and what we were facing potentially, and how bad and terrible it got, and how many people seem to still like this horrible man. And then when it changed, it did feel like a weight was lifted off you, even if it didn't change your own personal circumstances around health, finance, relationships, whatever things that bother us. It did seem like things got better. I'm happy to hear that that's been what's happened for you. And now you're in it. You're there. You're in Chicago, and we're going to try to check in with you each day. And today was your first day there, and it's been a really exciting day. You're taking a little break, and then you're going back after it. You're going out partying with a whole bunch of other folks that are there, that are having a lot of parties are taking place. But take me through your day. What did you do in the morning? You had a delegate breakfast. There were some very important VIPs there, huh? Governors?
Yes. So they have these delegate breakfasts every morning, and I get to attend every morning. There are speakers and guests every morning. Today, we heard from Nikki Fried, the chairwoman of the DNC in Florida. We heard from Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Governor Josh Shapiro were there. I actually took a photo with Big Gretch. I'm so excited about that. And then lastly, we heard from Congresswoman Kathy Castor from the Tampa Bay area. And I had never heard her name before, but she is really cool. She's been an incredible worker in the fight for the climate crisis, or the fight against the climate crisis, really.
She's against it, not for it. I'm for it. Controversially, I'm for it because I think our species has really ruined things. No, you were telling me about her. She sounds really interesting. And you said that something like she referred many pieces of policy, hundreds of pieces of policy to the Biden administration and passed like 300 pieces of policy. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but given that it's climate action, I want to see what that stuff. I nerd out on what those policies are to help adapt to what is obviously happening in our world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I saw her at breakfast and then I saw her again later at the Climate Crisis Council. And Representative Sean Casten actually called her out, gave this stat that she made 700 policy recommendations to the Biden administration. 300 of them became law 2 years later as part of the IRA and the BIL. So she's done incredible work. I couldn't believe I had never heard her name, but she's definitely on my radar now.
She's a congresswoman representing Florida's 14th district, which is the Tampa Bay area, obviously a Democrat. We think of Florida, we think of it's become a red state, but we can talk, and we will this week, about how that's changing. The only thing that makes me think is, why are the Pennsylvania governor and Michigan governor at the Florida delegate breakfast? There's 49 other delegate breakfasts, and you just have to wonder why such primetime stars, those are the top 5 Democratic stars governors in the country, and they're spending time slumming it with Florida Democrats like you.
Honestly, fair. I really think all eyes are on Florida in this race. I really think we have a shot at getting Rick Scott out of the Senate seat.
Wow.
We have abortion and cannabis on the ballot as direct vote referenda, and I think that's going to turn out a lot of young voters, especially, and get a lot of blue people in office. So I'm excited for Florida. I think a lot of other people are excited.
Yeah,
for Florida
I say slumming. I feel bad now for saying it because some of the best activists I know, and obviously my friends down at the Florida Education Association, Andrew Spar, who's joined me many times, some of the best, smartest, most passionate activists, organizers, and policymakers are in Florida. And so I kid my Floridian progressive. So what was the climate? So after the delegate breakfast, you went to this climate. What was it?
Yeah, in the middle between those, I first went to something called Progressive Central, which was run by the Progressive Democrats for America. And their goal really was to have their own convention alongside the DNC to talk about their issues and their policies. And that was great. I paid for entry for that one. And I was at the panel called Organized Labor on the Rise, the 2020s and Beyond. We heard from union leaders and organizers.
Awesome.
We heard from Nina Turner, Saru Jayaraman. She works with the One Fair Wage organization. We heard from Sarah Nelson, who, Pete, you mentioned you're going to be speaking with very soon.
Yeah,
right?
in Orlando at a panel of union leaders. Sarah Nelson is the head of the Flight Attendants Association, and you told me a fascinating story that she told.
Yeah, she told this story during her speech. So the flight that crashed into the second tower on 9/11 was her regular route. So when she was talking about her experience as a flight attendant, she got choked up and she said, I know the exact time that my friends died because that was my route and I did that route all the time. And that really stuck with me.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's an important point to make in a speech and obviously a flashpoint in her life. It's absolutely crazy. All right. So you see her speak, you see some other very influential union leaders speak, which is great. Who was in that group, by the way? Was it young people? Was it old, young, white, black? Any demographics at the organized labor panel?
Total mix. Every event I went to today, I was blown away with the diversity in age, in race. It was just incredible. I would say the Progressive Central leaned a little older, which I found interesting.
I love to hear it. Anything named progressive where the olds are at I'm into it. Great.
Yeah, I was getting the hippie vibe from some of them, which feels right. But yeah, totally diverse. It was incredible. And I kept thinking, like, the RNC is not this diverse. Like, this is the place to be. look at all these people.
Yep. And that's true. I've been to 2 RNCs, and that's true.
Have you?
Yeah. I used to cover them for SiriusXM and CNN, and back in the before times, obviously. And yeah, and it was always the joke that they are all so white and older, obviously, but not a lot of diversity. You would joke about it when you see a non-white person. Okay, so what happens next in Abby's exciting adventure at the DNC in Chicago?
I just wanted to tell one final anecdote from Progressive Central. Stacey Davis Gates was the final speaker. She's the president of the Chicago Teachers Union. The convention was held in the Chicago Teachers Union building. And this random guy in the audience cheered when she said something. And she goes, I pay him. And the guy goes, I work cheap. And then Stacey said, oh, you better not.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's great. What a great, I love it. I love those moments.
I wrote it down. I was like, oh, so charming.
Great.
Practices what she preaches. So after that, I made my way back to the McCormick Center. So that's one of the 2 official DNC centers where events are happening. So the United Center is where all the nighttime events, like the actual convention, is happening.
Right.
And then the McCormick Center is where the daytime events are happening. So there are all kinds of trainings put on by the DNC related to organizing and other things. I'm going to one tomorrow on AI and deepfakes, actually. And that is also where the caucus and council meetings happen. So I went to the Environment and Climate Crisis Council.
Cool.
And we heard from Randi Weingarten, who is also part of that panel that you referenced earlier.
Yeah, old friend. You love her. She's so great.
Governor.
Such a great speaker.
Yeah.
Did you see her speak? She's amazing.
Yes, she was incredible. Governor Maura Healey from Massachusetts, Representative Ro Khanna from California, Kathy Castor from Florida again, and then Representative Sean Casten. Then we heard from Dr. Beverly Wright. She's the founder and executive director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. And her talk was kind of a history lesson of environmental justice in general. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting. I'm going to try and get the slides for you because she showed this timeline, and it was like from 1990 to 1994, we had 4 or 5 laws passed in the area of environmental justice and committees formed, things like that. And then there was this huge gap until 2020, when in the first 100 days of office, Biden made all of these climate policies related to environmental justice. And since I said 2020. Oh, that was right. 2020. Yeah. Since then, I have to pull the slide for you. It was just lists and lists of all the committees and policies that have been passed related to environmental justice within Biden's administration. So that was fascinating to see. Like, we got, this has been around since the early 90s. This has been on people's radar. And there was a little bit of momentum there, and then nothing happened.
Yes, and I've followed
26 years.
I've followed and been an active member of that movement, not specifically environmental justice per se, but the environmental movement, the conservation movement. And it's exactly right. And I just have to always wonder if people generally know. I think environmental activists know, because it was because of environmental activists that so many of those policies got passed, got even proposed. And sometimes I just don't think that they get credit. And obviously the Biden administration, President Biden, doesn't get enough credit for what he's done on the environment. But smart people in the know do give it to him, because they have been paying attention to the movement, as you said, that was paused or frozen for such a long time. There it is.
We got a nice little list today of all of the wins.
Abigail's holding that up. Take a picture of that with your phone, and I'll include it in the show notes.
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. All right. Now, where do we go from the environmental? Was there anything else there that you wanted to mention, or where do we go from there?
Nope. After that, I went back to Progressive Central because Representative Maxwell Alejandro Frost was going to be speaking, and I'm a huge fan of his. He was the first Gen Z Congress member, and he represents Orlando, Florida. He's actually my brother's congressperson, and I think he's so cool. I think it's amazing what he's doing. And he spoke on how he really got into politics because of gun violence.
Yeah.
And specifically, the Sandy Hook shooting was the kind of turning point event for him. He was 15 years old at the time. He got up there and he delivered just an amazing speech about how progressive policies by their nature, solve gun violence. Because gun violence is when people don't have any other options.
Okay, let's go to a quick clip. Abigail taped Congressman Maxwell Frost talking about what she just said.
We all know politics can be really confusing. It needs to take a long time to get done. But in organizing, sometimes all it takes is like your voice, creativity, a freaking cell phone, and you can have an impact on what the leader of the free world thinks on a very important issue. Being a progressive is, yes, about our ideology and what we believe, right? So there's something Pramila Jayapal always says that I love. She says, if politics is about the art of the possible, then being a progressive is just about stretching what is possible.
And so affordable housing and fair wages and universal health care mean that people don't get to the point where they don't have any other options.
It's a social problem, and it's exacerbated by violence is everywhere, but it's because of all the guns. But it's such an important, good point. I'll never forget hearing a sociologist talk about some statistics. Obviously, Chicago has the most gun violence, I think it's in any city in America. But like some statistics about where there are boys and girls clubs, where there are places for young people to be and be productive and do things and hang out safely, there's less gun violence. So, I love that he was describing it that way, because it's exactly what it is. It's a social problem, and you can solve that through, as you're saying, as he was saying, progressive policies is what I'm hearing you say, he said.
Exactly. And I think it's just such a smart, logical jump to be passionate about gun violence and then to stand by progressive policies, to have that parlay into having a progressive policy focus. And I'd never heard anyone really describe that process before, and I really appreciated hearing it from him. And actually, as we were walking out, I snuck in to get a handshake from him and just say how cool I thought he was, and that my brother's his constituent, and that I'm in Gainesville, so I'm not too far away. But
the
funniest part of all that was that I had gone back to Progressive Central specifically to see Representative Frost speak. I had known, because it had been advertised, that Bernie was going to be there at some point, but he was not on the schedule. I think that's because they knew if people knew what time he was speaking, they would all mob the place at that time. So I walked in probably about 10 minutes before Representative Frost was supposed to go on. And I heard Bernie's voice. And I was like, oh my God, I made it.
Aggressive people are now winning election. Maxwell is certainly one of those. So, all right, with that, let me thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Bernie Sanders.
So I walk inside and I was able to hear one sentence of Bernie.
And here comes Abigail Hummel. Everybody, give it up. Is that what you heard?
Yeah, basically.
So weird that Bernie Sanders introduced you. You being a correspondent and stand up really put you on the map, Abigail. I called in a favor.
Thanks, Pete. It was wonderful to be called out on stage like that by a real legend in progressive politics.
That's very cool that you saw it. So you see him, you just catch him introduce Maxwell Frost, Congressman.
Yes. The sentence I heard, and I actually recorded it for you, Pete.
Oh, good.
The sentence I heard was, progressive people are winning elections, and Maxwell Frost is a great example of that. And I was like, hell yeah, couldn't agree more. And then he left the room, and no one got to take a photo with him. He just scooted on out. But to be in the room with him was still very cool.
Love
I've been to a rally of his back in 2016.
Yeah, I've interviewed him several times over the years, and everybody loves Bernie. He's one of the biggest stars there. Still going strong. Doesn't seem to have lost a step. All right, anything else? What happened next?
Best. Then I took the train back to my hotel, and I got on the phone with you, Pete.
Awesome. Well, listen, you're going to go out tonight, and at this point, when people are hearing this, night one will be over, and speeches will be given, and we'll get a pretty great idea, in my opinion, Abigail, of the energy in that arena. And I remember Denver in 2008 when Barack Obama was there. I think it was like 80,000 people. And I don't know how many seats can fit in the United Center. It's not nearly that many. That was a football stadium. They're in a basketball hockey place, I believe. But regardless, I think they're going to blow the roof off the place, and it'll all be said and done by the time people hear this. But the energy, I'm sure, tonight. Are you going to be in the room in the United Center?
I won't. But I do. People won't hear this, but I just want to mention the Florida delegation gave out aviators. And so the whole Florida delegation is going to put on their aviators when President Biden speaks.
That's awesome.
Just as a sign.
That's great. And they're up front, too, I noticed. I think Florida's up close, the Florida delegation, I believe, to the stage.
Are they?
I'm
great.
pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw that. So, gosh. All right.
Eyes on Florida.
I am so excited to talk to you because of the way that your enthusiasm is around all of this. What a great opportunity you took to be there. I wish I was there with you, but I am excited to have you there and hopefully to talk to you almost every day this week. Whatever we can get some time with you, I will take it. And I'm so thankful. And so is the rest of the stand-up audience. We love Abigail Hummel and the whole Hummel family, and we are really happy that you were able to join us.
I'm happy to be here, Pete, and shout out to everyone. Hi. I'm so proud and glad to be your DNC correspondent. And Pete, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Look forward to it. Yeah, Abigail Hummel. Isn't she awesome and fun and smart and funny and just really great, passionate? I love it. I love talking to her. And she is a natural, so good at this. And I will probably talk to her every day this week from the DNC. I wish I could be there myself, but man, it is so great to have Abigail there. We're so happy. And go connect with her. I gave her email on the show notes, and you can let her know that you appreciate her joining us, and you can see her often in the Thursday night hangouts. All right, that's it. That's all I've got for you. Nayyera Hawk, Abigail Hummel, and all of those clips. I book it, I host it, I edit it, I promote it, produce it, and post it every night. And it is almost 1 a.m. on this first night of the DNC. So I am very grateful for your support. I couldn't do it without it. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Tell your friends. Write a rating review at Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. I'll talk to you tomorrow. John Carroll does all the music for the show. Go to johncarroll.org and buy it. Be the change you want to see in the world, you bumblebees.
To let in some light, you gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. You got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, down off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience. So they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody come on.